Hi everyone, welcome to Ask the Expert, which is a daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. Please ask any questions in the comments or using the hashtag QBATE on Twitter. I'm Luke Bath. I work at an accounting firm called Alliotts. We have an office in London, in Holborn, and also in Guildford. We're about 100 staff members, and we're 12 partners. Four of which are in Guildford, 8 are in London. We look after around 2,000 to 3,000 clients, and it's kind of a broad spectrum of clients. We have a number of specialist sectors, which you'll see on our website. And we're also one of the kind of differentiators for a firm of our size is that we are one of the founding members of an international network called Alliott Group, which gives us, I think, a presence in 166 countries and, 166 cities in 66 countries, which means that kind of the work that we do is quite international in nature. Whether that's businesses that, whether that's businesses that have looking to expand internationally, or they're UK based, and they have some kind of international complication, or we do a lot of companies that looking to invest in the UK and setting up operations, or a holding company in the UK, that type of thing. And just thinking about me and how I've been affected by COVID-19. So our office closed a couple of weeks before the lockdown, and since then we've all been working from home. And it's been working quite well, to be honest. So everyone's working really well. Efficiency is quite good. Everyone's got like a work laptop. We all just log in remotely. I think we use a VPN, and everyone messages each other on Teams. So it works quite well. And in terms of me personally, so my wife at the moment, she's pregnant. She's actually furloughed at the moment. So she's at home, not really doing anything. But it's quite good because she's quite relaxed. But it can be quite difficult because she's also type 1 diabetic. So it's just managing that as well. So I can see I've got a couple of questions. So I'm just going to take a few of those. So I've got one from Jani on Twitter, and she said, I started my company 6 months ago, and I have an online shop selling secondhand clothes. I barely get any customers at the moment, and I know I have to change my approach or ride out the wave, but feel overwhelmed. Any advice? Yes, so that's difficult. So you have an online shop. So I'm just trying to read the question again. Yeah, so it is really difficult at the moment with, companies that are trading online, and they're seeing a reduction in trading. But Gianni, have you thought about perhaps what's your approach to marketing? That might be something that's worth looking at. Just whether it's taking advantage of adverts on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. I'm just trying to think. I'm sure, have you explored all the government schemes? So I don't know if you've looked at so it looks like you're a company, and I know you only started 6 months ago, but have you looked at exploring the coronavirus business interruption loans that the government are offering? I know that they are quite difficult to access, is the kind of the feedback I'm getting from clients, but that's certainly worth exploring, because you can get you apply to the best way to apply is to apply to your usual bank. Apply to your usual bank for the coronavirus business interruption loan. Any amounts up to 250,000. There's no personal guarantee required by the bank. You'll get a loan where there's no interest payments required for 12 months. In some cases, you can get capital repayment holidays as well, I believe. So that might be useful, especially if you've got staff to pay in the meantime. But yeah, no, I totally appreciate what you're saying about your online shop not getting any business, but perhaps I'd have a real think about your marketing, and whether you can use online marketing a bit more. I don't know if you're doing that already. Yeah, that might be an option to explore. Hopefully that's helpful, but if not, feel free to get in touch and we can discuss further. So I've also had a question here from Raj on Twitter. He says, I run a small business for 6 years that's been very successful so far. With COVID-19, the business is struggling. I'm now looking over the budget to cut back on unnecessary costs. Do you have any financial advice how I should think, what I should cut back on first and what I could wait a while to cut back on? Yeah, so Raj, the first thing I assume probably one of your biggest costs will be your salaries. I don't know if you've looked at the coronavirus job retention scheme, which is essentially where you can furlough your staff members. So essentially the government will cover 80% of your employee's wage up to a cap of $2,500 per employee. So you do have to agree with your employees to be furloughed, but that can be quite useful to remove the cost of the salaries. And you agree with your employee to pay them 80% of their normal wage up to a cap of 2,500, and then you have a choice whether you top up their wage up to 100%. But yeah, that can be useful because that's taking away a massive chunk of those costs for wages. I guess what else? It depends. Honestly, it really depends what your business situation is. I mean, feel free to get in touch afterwards. You can find. You can get in touch with me if you go onto the Alliotts website, which is ALLIOTTS.com. You can find me on the Our People section. Totally happy with all these questions to have a discussion afterwards, in detail about your particular situation. But yeah, I think one of the main things is the furlough scheme, this job retention scheme that I mentioned. That means that you can really trim down those wage costs if you have staff members that aren't doing anything. But aside from that, again, as I was saying for the query before, there's the business interruption loan is designed to give you cash ASAP, with no interest payments for 12 months, which means that you've got a bit of breathing space, and you can kind of cover these costs in the meantime. But in terms of cutting back on other costs, it really depends on your business type, Raj. It's trying to trim back those costs that maybe not using at the moment. Yeah, I think I'll just move on to the next question. So I've got a question here from Jenny on Facebook Messenger. I don't pay business rates directly. My landlord is liable for paying rates for the premises where my business is located. Can I still apply for a business grant? So in terms of the rates relief that the government have announced, your local authority will contact you to arrange the refund of the rates or for any payment due to you. So in that situation, it sounds like your landlord will be the one that will receive the refund rather than you directly. But I would certainly, reach out to your landlord to see whether, I'm not particularly sure what the actual situation is there, but if you are paying your landlord for a contribution to the rates, and then he's paying it directly to the local authority, maybe have a conversation with your landlord about whether that discount or refund is going to be passed on to you. Yeah, I think it's worth having a conversation with your landlord about that. But certainly in terms of the rates holidays, the rates refunds, they all come directly from the local authority and they will contact you rather than you having to do anything directly. There's a question from Nils on Twitter. He says, I'm running a small business and have 5 employees. I'm doing all I can to power through the situation, but I really don't know if my business will survive or not. What are the pros and cons for furloughing people or letting them go? My employees mean everything to me and I want to help them as much as possible, but I don't want to lose my business I worked so hard for, and I don't know if I'll be able to trade as before for a very long time. Well, Nils, what I'd say there is the kind of the pro of, well, the real pro of the furlough scheme is that you don't have to make any staff members redundant. So if you, with those 5 employees, if business is really leveled off and maybe 3 or 4 of those people aren't doing any work at the moment, it just makes total sense to put them on furlough. Because then when the business, so currently the furlough scheme exists from the 1st of March to the 30th of June, well, actually no, 31st of May. But the government will has said that they'll look at that and expand it in future if necessary, which I'd be very surprised if they don't. But yeah, for those 3 or 4 employees that aren't really working at the moment, it makes sense to put them on furlough, because if the business picks up again, I'm not really sure what your business type is, but if the business picks up again with furlough, it works in 3-week chunks. So essentially, you can put an employee on furlough for 3 weeks, and then review after 3 weeks and hire them as normal again. Because the key thing is for the furlough scheme, as I'm sure you're probably aware based on your question, they can't work for you during that period. So it makes sense to, if the work has really dropped off, to put them on furlough, review in 3 weeks or every 3 weeks, and then bring them back into the business if you expect, or if by that point you're expecting further trading. But if in 3 weeks time, or 6 weeks time, well, actually in 3 weeks time, if there's no change to the business situation, you may as well just leave those employees on furlough. But if the government, or you get to the end of the 31st of May and the government hasn't extended the furlough scheme, then ultimately you'll have to start paying for those employees again, and that's the point, I guess, at which you might need to think about redundancy if the business has no realistic prospect of increasing trading. But yeah, I'd be looking now for the current pay period, whatever that is for you, to put those employees that really don't have anything to do, to put them on furlough as soon as possible. So that's a real cost saving straight away. In terms of those fixed costs, that similar to the previous answers, but in terms of those fixed costs that you can't cancel or you can't defer in any way by having a conversation with the supplier, that's kind of where the coronavirus business interruption loan comes in, to kind of cover these periods of poor trading essentially for everyone, where there is reduced consumption of services and things. But hopefully that answers your question. If you haven't, by the way, if anyone has any detailed queries on the furlough scheme, or the coronavirus job retention scheme, or also on the interruption loans, or anything like that, please feel free to get in touch with me. My phone number and stuff is on the website, our Alliotts website. Yeah, please feel free to reach out, and then I can direct you to kind of specialists within our team who can help you further. So I've just got a couple of other questions. So Dirk from Facebook, Dirk said that, I believe I'm eligible for the small business grant, but I don't understand how it will work with my tax. Will I be taxed as usual? So the small business grant, I'm assuming you're referring to the one that relates to businesses who pay little to no business rates. They're eligible for a grant. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head whether that is taxable. Probably is for corporation tax purposes, if that's what you mean. But I can, if you feel free to get in touch, and I can double check that for you after the video. So Robin on Twitter has said that, I'm thinking of starting a new business now in the middle of the pandemic. Any advice? I believe my idea is strong and I have all this extra time on my hands. Any advice based on the current landscape would be much appreciated. So Robin, what I'd say is definitely there are some opportunities, I think, in the pandemic. So you have everyone who is at home. Certainly if you can get an online operation up and running, which I appreciate might be difficult, given that, suppliers that you speak to arrange things will likely be slower because they can't access, they're not in their offices, and if you need printed materials and that type of thing, it might be difficult to obtain. But certainly I think in the online space there are lots of opportunities, because you have all these people at home. A lot of people will still be ordering online, not just essential goods, I think. So yeah, certainly if you have all this extra time, I don't think it can hurt to explore starting a business now. I mean, it really depends what the idea is, but yeah, I think so. I don't know if the one thing I would make sure is, I'm assuming that you're not a current employee of a company somewhere or a business somewhere, because it is a condition that you can't work for your current employer under the furlough scheme. And you'd have to check if you are an employee for someone else that's currently on furlough, and that is why you have this extra time. I would be very careful, because there are often conditions in employment contracts and things like that to say that you can't work for yourself or for another employer without their approval. So I think that's something I'd certainly check. But definitely, I think there are opportunities, provided you can actually get your operation set up. There is kind of a captive audience, if that makes sense. So I've had a question from Tom on Twitter. Tom says, what kind of tech are you using at the moment while you're working from home? So I'm currently in my dining room, just because I'm recording this video, but normally I have my wife has a study that she usually uses. So I'm based in there at the moment. It's a nice view out to my back garden. But I just have, I think it's a HP ProBook laptop. I have an old TV screen that I'm using as a second screen, and a mouse connected, and I just have my my Apple headphones. But in terms of tech, so we had at Alliotts, we had a IT upgrade, quite luckily. I think it was nine months ago, where we kind of upgraded to Office 365. So we're using, kind of as I mentioned before, we're using Outlook. All the kind of Microsoft suite, in particular Teams, is really useful for communicating internally. And then, as everyone else probably is at the moment, we're using Zoom for kind of ad hoc group calls with external clients, or with prospective clients, that sort of thing. And then I'm just taking a lot of phone calls. So all our phones in the office are directed to our mobile phones, which is great if the clients can get in touch with me. And that's it, really. I think all the software that we're using, whether that's QuickBooks or anything else, is kind of all cloud-based. And certainly in terms of our outsourcing department, we're all paperless, so that's not really affecting us in a big way. But I have a printer next to me if I really do need to print something, if I'm reviewing something in detail. But yeah, so that's kind of all the tech we're using, to be honest. So I have a question here from Lola on Facebook. So Lola says, some of my clients have received £25,000 grants from local councils, even though their business was not affected by COVID-19. Is this right? Does every business receive the grant regardless? They did not have to fill in any forms. Payment just appeared in their accounts. So Lola, the local authorities, based on my understanding, they make an assessment of, I assume it's based on the well, it is based on the rateable value of the property they occupy, but also the, I forget what it's called. There's a code, kind of their rateable use. And yeah, essentially the local authorities are assessing who is eligible for the grant based on those criteria, and they will just pay out the money regardless, based on what they have on their system. So certainly, if you're having clients that you think it's kind of, hugely inappropriate that they've had that cash, and their business doesn't appear to be covered by the government scheme, I'll certainly ask them to get in touch with the local authority before they spend that money, because at a later date the local authority might review in further detail the payments they've made, because obviously the priority right now is just to get it out to businesses. But yeah, if it seems really inappropriate, I'd get in touch with the local authorities. But certainly, no, there is no requirement to fill in any forms. Generally, the local authorities are just making an assessment based on what they have on file and based on the criteria they've been given by the government, and that's kind of how that works. So I think that I've had a question. I think sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but I think it's Sele from Twitter. What is the best way to cut costs at the moment? Is it a good idea to fire the bookkeeper or accountant? Is it silly? In my opinion, Sele, that's probably one of the worst things you can do. Certainly, if you have a bookkeeper internally, and personally, my personal view is unless you have a high transaction volume these days, or that bookkeeper is doing lots of kind of added value services elsewhere, it might be more cost effective to look at using an external accountant. So what I do, most of my job is outsourcing, which is where we do anything from basic bookkeeping and VAT, quarterly VAT returns, quarterly management accounts, right the way through to weekly payments, forecasting. We can do weekly summaries of key figures, that type of thing, daily bookkeeping, and we do everything in between, really. And it's kind of just totally flexible on what people do. But I would say these days, if you run a small business and you set up your operations in the correct way, you can save a lot of money by not employing a full-time, part-time bookkeeper. And it can often be cost-effective to use like an outsourced accounting service. But right now, if you're trying to cut costs, it's probably not a great idea to fire your internal bookkeeper, mainly because you'll have no visibility, I would imagine, on your kind of day-to-day figures. If you're saying about firing the accountant, I mean, yeah, it's difficult without knowing what your particular circumstances are. But in terms of the best way to cut costs right now, again, wages is a huge cost for everyone. If you have staff that don't have anything to do, the best thing to do is to put them on furlough, because that saves a massive. Well, essentially, you're getting rid of their wage costs temporarily. In terms of other costs, it's having a conversation with your suppliers. It's very different business to business, but it's worth having a conversation with your suppliers to see if you can delay payments to them. I've not mentioned this yet, but there is, I'm sure everyone's seen that on the government's web pages, the HMRC have expanded their time to pay scheme, which is essentially a way you can delay payments of PAYE and corporation tax. I've spoken to a few clients that have explored that, and actually HMRC are very open to deferring PAYE or corporation tax payments for several months at the moment. And as I'm sure you've seen, any VAT payments over the next couple of months are automatically deferred. But in terms of those, monthly costs that you're incurring, it really depends business to business. But I'd have a real, go through your P&L and have a real think about whether are all those costs absolutely necessary, considering what your trading activity is right now. For example, just trying to think of something that will kind of apply to everyone. But certainly, I don't think accounting is. I know it might seem like an easy win, but I don't think it is, because you'll lose visibility of your figures. So I hope that answers your question. But again, if anyone wants to have a run through their P&L just to see what sensible things would be to cut, and right now, please give me a call or send me an email. So Turn from Twitter, I have a question here. Did your company give you an allowance to buy equipment to work from home? Should I do this for my staff? I've winged it so far, but some staff are complaining I'm not doing enough. So for us at Alliotts, essentially we're all kitted out anyway with a laptop. That's all we have. We don't have a fixed desk computer in the office. We all just have laptops. When we go to, you take your laptop to work with you. Normally this is, and we connect into like a tiny docking station, and we just have two screens. That's generally how it works for us. But if you're if your staff are saying, I need equipment to work from home, I think it's reasonable that, obviously they have a laptop because they can't do any work for you at all. But in terms of things like second screens, certainly that's not something we're doing for employees. And to be honest, my personal opinion is I've been getting one on for, I think it was 2 weeks, where I didn't have a second screen at all, but I've just pulled an old television out of the loft to use as a second screen. But for the 2 weeks where I wasn't using that, actually the laptop was fine. Obviously it has a keyboard, and maybe the only thing that would be reasonable to get a reasonable thing to buy for your employees would be a mouse. I think that massively increases productivity. But yeah, I don't think it's necessary to give employees an allowance to buy equipment. As long as they have laptops or they have, fixed computers that they could take out of the office. I think, personally, I think that's fine. So I'm just reading the questions I've got here. So I've got one from Oliver on Twitter. I feel confident that my small business will survive this pandemic. I've cut down on all costs and have savings. Thanking my younger self. That's a good idea. But I need to start thinking about what's next. Do you have any advice? I'm running a carpet cleaning company. So I don't know if you're still cleaning. I don't know if you clean at your business premises or you go out to clean carpets, but well, I guess it must be rugs if they're coming to you. But if I guess it depends whether your clients are still letting you into their homes to clean carpets, or whether people are still bringing carpets, rugs, etc. to you to clean. But yeah, I think cutting down on all costs is a fantastic idea. Putting all your staff on furlough where possible. But in terms of thinking about what's next, it really depends what the government decide to do. I'm sure you've seen that yesterday they announced that the lockdown's been extended by 3 weeks. So again, I think just over the next 3 weeks at least, it's about kind of reducing your costs as much as possible. It's just reducing your costs as much as possible so that when the lockdown is cleared, you can really open up as usual and start trading as normal. So Preem from Facebook Messenger sent a query: would this be a good time to retrain as an accountant? Not really, Preem. I don't think so. Certainly because I think, as you've probably seen in the news, all the professional services sector is also going to experience a massive downturn. Not to be negative about the situation, but there will be, inevitably economic problems over the next few years. So, accountants are going to suffer just as much as everyone else, to be honest. And kind of accounting is, to some extent, a discretionary spend in terms of doing, accounts. And we're seeing right now that people are deferring when to do their accounts and when to do their tax returns, and people are going to leave it to the last minute. So I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to retrain right now. But in terms of long term, accounting's a fantastic career. I started as an accountant nearly 9 years ago, I think it is. Yeah, nearly 9 years ago. I love accounting. I love dealing with people. But anyway, so essentially, thanks for listening, guys. On Monday, there will be a similar presentation with Sam Gooding on 8:30 at Monday morning. But if anyone's got any questions, please give me, please get in touch. You can get my details on Alliotts.com. I hope that's been useful. That's it.